top of the news hour is that India is being able to take out some students out of Ukraine. India's evacuation has taken out 18 stranded students from the Hungary route. 470 students earlier today had come out through the Romanian route, and efforts are on also to send two planes to evacuate 2,000 more students out of Ukraine. That's the big breaking news that's coming in. The 18 students who have been got out of Hungary via the Hungary route out of Ukraine shows that the evacuation process is gathering steam. Let's listen in to what these rescued students had to say.
भारत के अलग-अलग कोने से हम लोग अभी हंगरी के लिए निकल चुके हैं और हम बॉर्डर पे जितनी जल्दी हो सके पहुंचने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं। आप लोग हमें बस अपना प्यार बनाए रखें और हमारे सरकार से विनती करें कि जल्दी से जल्दी हम लोग इवैक्यूएट करें हंगरी से, और हंगरी के अगर आसपास में बॉर्डर पे कुछ भी होता है लाइक वीजा इशू, तो हमें जल्दी से जल्दी हमारी एम्बेसी क्लियर कराए, वहाँ से हमें बॉर्डर के अंदर कराए हंगरी के। धन्यवाद। सभी को पता है कि अभी यूक्रेन और रशिया का विवाद चालू है और रशिया इन्वेट कर चुका है।
Jonathan Gilbert, my colleague, joining me live from the Romanian-Ukraine border. Good evening, Jonathan. What is the situation that you're seeing at the place where you're in? We're expecting a lot of Indian students to be rescued through that route by the Indian government and NRIs in Romania and other countries surrounding Ukraine. What's the latest information that you can give us about these rescue efforts at the moment?
Yes, well, this really is an extraordinary development, isn't it? And very brave indeed to launch this evacuation attempt. I think the big challenge really is, well, it's twofold. It's number one, it's going to be getting out of Ukraine in the first place, because obviously Ukrainian airspace is closed to all civilian traffic. And I would imagine that road journey would be pretty hairy, whichever direction you took, whether it was out via Poland or Hungary, and as you say, out via Romania, which is exactly where I'm standing now. Now, obviously, there may also be complications at the border itself. I mean, I haven't got to the border yet, but generally speaking, border guards don't take well to people simply rocking up without the necessary visas and paperwork. Perhaps they're willing to make an exception in this case, but it's certainly going to be quite a perilous and arduous journey for these Indian refugees.
Thank you, Jonathan. We'll be waiting for your dispatches coming in from Romania and Ukraine as soon as you can get in there and meet up with those students waiting to be rescued. Of course, nervousness mounting for some of them, given the fact that the Russian troops are at the capital of Ukraine in Kiev. More breaking news coming in. Russian President Putin has called on the Ukrainian army to overthrow the leadership in Kiev in a televised address to the nation just a short while ago. This clearly means that Putin, keeping with his first statement that he was not looking to take the complete power in Ukraine, but was looking at demilitarizing Ukraine. He has virtually told the military, the army in Ukraine, to overthrow the democratically elected government. Tensions mounting between Russia and Ukraine. As of now, no real military help coming Ukraine's way from the Western world, including America, and that seems to be the lament coming out of Ukraine by the president himself earlier this morning. Big breaking news and stepping up of tensions in Ukraine. Clearly visible there with all the visuals of the devastation and, of course, the humanitarian crisis with the newborn babies being taken to bunkers. A scene that would really make you cry, looking at the ravages of war and what war can do to the common people. Also, visuals of military being on standby, some of them being overpowered, and that is the situation in Kyiv. And joining me tonight on the NewsHour is an August panel. Dr Sudhanshu Trivedi, Member of Parliament and National Spokesperson of the BJP, Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow at the ORF, Sanjay Jha, author, Ajay Shukla, Strategic Affairs Expert. My first question to you, Mr. Ajay Shukla. How do you see this entire situation? Do you think at this moment taking a very, very balanced and nuanced position may be the only option India can follow?
Well, a balanced and nuanced position usually amounts to actually just sitting on the fence and not taking a position one way or the other. That's the most nuanced position of all. But India is, it needs to take on a larger role in what is happening right now. It needs to establish communications. I'm talking about continuous communications with Russia and with Ukraine. And it cannot possibly be the case for any Indian leader to turn around and say, we're just going to remain witness to what is happening. Remember, the Russian embassy is putting pressure on the Indian government. The Charge d'Affaires has already said that he expects support from India in the UN Security Council debate. This is all various ways of putting pressure on India, but I think at the end of the day, India needs to take on a moral, a calibrated position, and not just be sort of an outsider to the sort of dealings and wheeling dealings that will take place. India needs to ensure that it has a share in that.
So what exactly would you advise India should do? Should it, take a position with Ukraine against Russia and burn its bridges there? What is it that you're advocating?
I would say that most non-biased people who are looking at what is happening would reach the conclusion that Russia has gratuitously invaded Ukraine. A very large country is invading a very small country. And if that is allowed to continue, if that becomes the way of the world, then you could very well have this sort of thing going on in other areas as well. For example, you could have China invading India. So I think that we need to take a leaf out of Russia's book. When India sort of launched the Balakot strikes and in the wake of a very heinous attack on Indian troops, Russia had taken a very sort of balanced position, saying that India and Pakistan need to jointly resolve the situation. So I think we need to take a leaf out of Russia's book. We need to sort of calibrate and see who is at fault. And in this case, it clearly is Russia. So India cannot take a pro-Russian position.
Is it as black and white as that, Sushant Sareen? Is Russia at fault, given the fact that for the last 15 years, Russia has been warning that this flirtation of the Western world to try and push Ukraine to get into the NATO, the fact that, Russia has been saying that America pushing the envelope on Ukraine is one way or another trying to provoke Russia. Do you think it's as black and white as that? And in diplomacy, can you see it, as stating that Russia is the bad guy here and Ukraine needs India's support?
Navika, between the five of us sitting on your panel, I think it's a bit of a no-brainer that what the Russians have done is not really justifiable. A full-scale invasion. They had legitimate security interests in Ukraine. Perhaps this could have played out differently, perhaps not. But I'm not going to get into that debate. For me, what is important is what is the position that India should take. I think India has taken a similarly balanced position, which Ajay is talking about at the time of Balakot. When we said, the statement which we issued in the UNSC, that was before the invasion, of course, Let's see what is the statement going to come out today. But we've taken that balanced position of the sorts which other countries take. I would really like to know what is the kind of balanced positions which the West has taken, for example, on Chinese aggression against India along the LAC. How much have they backed us completely and excoriated the Chinese on their bullying of India? How much have the Russians come on our side on that? Yes, they tried to mediate at some level, but how much have they actually come out on our side? Because clearly we didn't escalate matters in along the LAC. As far as pressure is concerned, it's not just the Russians. Ajay would probably know better than me that the Western countries are equally, breathing down our neck to take a certain position. The Ukrainian ambassador has also, weighed in on this whole issue, as has the Russians. But I think India will ultimately take a decision which is in India's interest. Now, just one final point. Look, the thing is that we really don't have much skin in this game. We are, in a manner of speaking, we are fence sitters. So for us to become Chaudharys in this game, it doesn't make much sense right now. Simply because the guys who have the skin in the game, even though they are criticizing the Russians quite openly and they are imposing sanctions, but they are very careful to not impose sanctions which will also hurt them. And yet there are American academics and think tankers and what have you who are, making such a big song and dance about why isn't India doing something which damages India's interests? Bhai, first you do what, you are supposed to do. You take the pain because you are the guys on the front lines. हम तो बाद में आते हैं, हम बाद में कर लेंगे ना. पहले आप तो करो. Why do you expect us to take the lead?
I
think we can wait for now. We can take a balanced position. We take a somewhat more neutral position. We can make some noises here and there. But sometimes it's better to make those noises in private rather than in public. And let's face it, Mr. Modi, when at least from the readout, it comes out that when he spoke to Mr. Putin, he made it very clear that there has to be a cessation of violence. The fighting has to stop. But what more can he do? He can't send the Indian army to force the Russians to back down.
Dr. Sudhanshu Trivedi, the world is really looking at this moment divided into two. On which side do you think India is going to stand on? Or is it, as Ajay Shukla says, sitting on the fence is actually not an option? We will have to take sides because many people feel that what Russia is doing to a smaller country like Ukraine is acting like a big bully. Do you think it's as simple as that?
First, I would like to appreciate what Mr. Ajay Shukla has said about Balakot, that after India strike at Balakot, then Russia has said that India and Pakistan should try to sort out the issue. So those who are trying to portray that Russia has taken a total categorical stand in favor of Pakistan is totally proves wrong. Now, come to this aspect. He has said it is morally things correct, but technically, has it ever happened in the history of the world or history of the today? Like Sushant Ji has said, in the top most powerful countries of the world, G7, are they taking a stand? Is China taking a stand? Then we should take a stand. Have we taken a stand when Russia invaded Czechoslovakia in 58-59? And the dastardly statement of Stalin after the mass rape by the US army, they were so much out of their home for so many months, so it happens. When China invaded Tibet, what we have done? We have welcomed Chow En-lai and even supported China for the seat of in United Nations Security Council. It was in as late as in 1961 after the 59 invasion. So for the first time, India is taking a very balanced approach, both from Russia and as far as the Western bloc. We know that since Mr. Shukla is a defense expert, he knows that we are having a sizable number of defense equipments which we have inherited from the Cold War era, which are coming from the Soviets, present Russia, including the latest S-400. So, we want to jeopardize our defense strategic location, despite the fact that none of the country, even the most powerful country on the earth, is not taking a stand. and we should try to take a stand. So I don't think, what my view is, government is taking proper cautious approach. Our main approach is to take out the stranded Indians. Out of 20,000 odd, we have taken out 4,000, 2,000 are on their way. And as far as proactive is concerned, Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi is the first world leader whom Putin has talked, and around 25 minutes of talk. None of the other head of the state has talked. So this shows how balanced, important, and mature approach India has taken diplomatically.
Sanjay Jha, are you in agreement that a balanced view of the world equation between America and Russia is what is the need of the hour? Or would you think, as Dr. Sudhanshu Trivedi points out, even US hasn't done anything? That's the lament of the president of Ukraine, that the biggest power in this world is actually sitting in a corner talking about some sanctions, which are not very big at the moment. And as far as Ukraine is concerned, it's left alone to defend themselves against a military operation in the country that has put the entire country in a situation where the visuals tell you the story.
Yeah, Navika, I agree. The visuals are extremely disturbing. You have a point, basically, and I don't think anybody here on your panel can deny it, that the government of India, and I'm sure many other governments actually, are having both their feet on separate banana peels. You are dealing here with two superpowers. Even if Russia has diminished, as you can see from Mr. Putin's aggression against Ukraine, the whole objective of Mr. Putin's game plan is to try and restore the historical glory, as I'm sure he believes is a grave injustice that happened in 1991, and he wants to reclaim the entire territories that were ceded once upon a time. Now, the truth is where India is concerned, and this, to some extent, I would love to know what Ajay Shukla or Sushant or even Sudhanshu Ji believes in this one. I believe India's policy, Navika, will have to be determined by the way we look at the Russian-China axis playing out. Now, it's pretty much in the public domain that at the end of the day, you are seeing a degree of Russian belligerence or bellicosity being determined by the fact that probably they have some kind of an understanding with China, because Mr. Putin had gone to Beijing, and in terms of maybe handling the sanctions, or probably, as you've seen, that China equally has ambitions very similar to Russia on Ukraine in terms of going and taking over Taiwan. So let me tell you, you are dealing in both China and Russia with two very powerful, what I would call as authoritarian demagogues, who are both hegemonic in terms of their intentions. India actually at the moment, and I will agree with both Sushant and Ajay and Sudhanshu here, all three of them, that India has to be careful. There is no denying that. The worry that India will have is that today, when you're a member of, say, for example, the Quadrilateral Security Authority, you have three members there like Japan, America, and Australia, who have imposed sanctions. Now, I agree with, again, all the panelists saying that the sanctions are very convenient sanctions. But India will have to be very aware of its own national security. Because if you have a Russia-China axis coming into play, and we all know how China and Pakistan are actually part of a very solid bilateral arrangement with a very militaristic overtones on India, then we could get isolated. Can you depend on America to back you in the event that tomorrow this trinity becomes a dangerous proposition at the borders? That is, I think, going to be the most compelling one for Indian defense experts to actually hold on to. America has not been very reliable. The way it exited from Afghanistan, I believe, has emboldened Putin into believing that this is an unreliable country. It invests trillions of dollars and can just vanish because they have a domestic constituency to feed into. So I do believe if India believes that America can be a reliable support to you, should China get into another expansive territorial ambitions into India, that is going to be the determining reason that India will have to look into. There is a moral issue here as well. There is no denying that Russia is violating international law, and it's tragic to see what you mentioned, children in subways and innocent Ukrainians being told, take an AK-47 to defend yourself. So there is a moral statement too that India has to make. And therefore, I would say probably not right away. Maybe we need to wait for a while. But at some point, we will have to do the fine balancing act between national security and being a country that the world cannot ignore anymore?
Well, on the question of morality, morality in international diplomatic relations, Sushant Sareen, how much of a role does that play? Because if you talk about morality, then what about the morality of the Western world? You're talking about the morality of Russia. Why would you not talk about America and Afghanistan and other parts of Middle East, etc., etc.? I mean, there is a whole historical chapter that you can, or a historical book that you can talk about the morality of the American approach so far. Yes, it's a complex situation, but do you think morality is going to decide India's standpoint diplomatically?
No, I think Sanjay Jha has made some excellent points, and on most issues I agree with him. In an ideal world, yes, you had to take a moral position, but there is a moral relativism in international relations, and as you very correctly pointed out, the Americans have violated the morality principle, and this fact that interests matter, not morality, in international relations is essentially a Western concept. So the point is that when it suits the Americans, they go and invade Iraq under a false pretext. They go and destroy Libya. They go and destabilize Syria, which was a wonderful, beautiful country. You might not like the regime out there. You might have huge problems with them. But look at the kind of devastation which has been wrought on Syria, for example. I could name country after country after country. Where was morality at that point of time? So let's not get into this morality argument, because it's something that everybody wants to climb on the moral high horse, but then everybody inevitably also gets off it when it suits them. So, and I don't see any reason that why we need to take that moral argument. We will make certain, presentations and representations, for example, to Russia, but we've done it in the past as well. When the Russians, for example, walked into Afghanistan in 1979, we did take it up with the Russians. We only didn't take it up in the press. We didn't make a big song and dance about it in public. It would not have made a difference one way or another, but at least the Russians knew what our positions on that was. So the point is that all of that is all very well. One point which Sanjay made, and I think it's a very critical point, the China factor. And I think the answer to that is we can't depend either on Russia, because if supposing things were really going to go down south between India and China, do we think that the Russians are going to put their weight in our corner, or do we think they will put their weight in the Chinese corner? Because in 1962, despite all our friendship with these guys, they actually leaned in the Chinese corner. And it was the Americans who came to our assistance at that point of time, not because they were in love with us or anything, but because they saw an opportunity in international diplomacy. I don't know what the Russian position will be if things between India and China go south. And I'm not even sure about what the American position is going to be. Will the Americans come on our back with the kind of support that we might need if we get into a scrap? So at the end of the day, let's be very clear that we have to be able to stand on our own 2 feet. We have to be able to meet all the challenges which Sanjay recounted on our own 2 feet, whether it's Russia, China, Pakistan, or the BRICS alliance where you add Iran also. All of these countries, if push comes to shove, at the end of the day, you have to depend on your own strength and your own resources and your own strategic assets, rather than, if help comes from other quarters, well and good. But if it doesn't, you shouldn't be looking out. Otherwise, you will end up like Ukraine. So you want us to take a position against the Russians today, and you want us to push the Chinese right now beyond a point. I am not fond of the Chinese. I'm sure none of us is on your panel. But you want us to take that strident stand. And if tomorrow all hell breaks loose, you make a Ukraine out of us, because when we look back, there's nobody on our back. So
that's exactly the worry. That's exactly the worry and the change in the world order that people are looking at. And Ajay Shukla, I want to ask you this question. Of course, morality, big nation invading a small nation, those pictures of newborn babies being rushed into a basement bunker, into metro stations underground. Yes, there is a moral dilemma for all of us. Nobody wants these babies who are born in the middle of missiles falling around them. Nobody, wants to see these kind of scenes anywhere in the world. But the fact of the matter is, look at America. Ultimately, Ukraine is left alone. America is putting some sanctions. You take a strident position against Russia. The sanctions won't hurt it as much as of now from what it looks like. And what if the world moves to crypto or bitcoins and Russia begins to use that? What will these sanctions really mean? It's something that we will have to keep in mind when we evaluate our diplomatic position in this situation where we are not the fulcrum. The war is happening somewhere and everybody is waiting to evaluate the situation between jumping to a position taking. Why then do you think this is the moment for India to take that position?
Navika, first of all, I agree with you that morality is not an absolute in international relations and that it has to be carefully considered, calibrated, and then put forward in a nation's ultimate interest. But everybody on your screen and as your guest is actually admitting that morality is a factor in international relations. It's just that we don't want to invoke it right now because it's not comfortable for us. I would argue, on the other hand, that morality is devoid of convenience and issues like that. You are moral for the sake of being moral. I would also bring to your attention that there are practical advantages to morality and practical disadvantages to the abandonment of morality. When China invaded Tibet in 1949, 1950, the whole world looked towards India for what they are going to do. India chose, and very unwisely as we are all understanding today, India chose to take a position of convenience. We decided not to intervene, not to make any statements and so on. And we are paying the price today because now everybody in the world just assumes that Tibet is a part of China. So I would put to you, Navika, that morality is an important factor. Morality needs to be invoked for its own sake. And that is especially so for a country like India, which has sort of a long history, a 70-year-old history of morality and the invoking of morality in international relations. So I would only leave it at that.
Dr. Sudhanshu Trivedi, you want to respond to that? That not taking a position at this moment may mean India being immoral, taking an immoral...
I just want to add one fact to what Ajay Shukla has said. At the time of invasion of Tibet to China, India had not taken a neutral stance, sir. In 1955, Bandung Conference in Indonesia, not only India taken a pro-China stand, it had threatened to boycott the conference if the China is not invited. And India became the first country in the world to accept the Tibetans' control over China, which was, in my opinion, naive to the extent of foolishness, the stand which India has taken. But we have taken a clear-cut view in favor of China. Now, coming to today's world, as Sanjay Jha has said, if Russia is becoming hawkish on the erstwhile CIS countries, China may become hawkish in the South China Sea. In that extent, where does India stand? I would like to thank to the Atmanirbhar Bharat policies of Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi that in the last 7 years, we were having all capability before even to have the Chandrayaan or Mangalyaan, but we were not exporting the missiles. We were having the intercontinental missiles, but we were not having the assault rifle from now today, from nuclear submarine to having the capability to hit anything in the lower Earth orbit to the assault rifles, to the digital infrastructure and all sort of defense equipments, including export of BrahMos missiles, India is becoming आत्मनिर्भर, क्योंकि finally ये ध्यान रखना चाहिए कि जो कुछ आपके हाथ में है वही आपके काम आता है ऐसी स्थिति में. And as far as morality is concerned, I would like to say in the 50s when Stalin was killing millions of their own person, we were with the Russia. When in 70s, Pol Pot were killing in Cambodia, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Bulgaria, Poland, Chairman Mao was killing their persons and we were with the Chairman Mao, Shanti ke kabutar उड़ा रहे थे. So we have very well seen, and forget about the latest version. अरे पाकिस्तान बांग्लादेश में जो पड़े हुए लोग थे उनको बिचारियों को जो मदद देने लगे तो कहते this is the internal matter of their country, why we should involve. So as far as the morality argument is concerned, I think it is more a political than an actual. And what stand our government has taken, actual and very rational and in the interest of India.
Sanjay Jha, you agree?
Well, I do agree that Ukraine actually has been abandoned by NATO as well as America. Let's be honest. I mean, the conversation on NATO, admitting Ukraine has been out there in the international domain for a long time. And anyone and his uncle who follows international politics will tell you that there would be no unanimity and there was great reluctance to make Ukraine a member. And therefore, Moscow today has exploited this flimsy pretext to say, listen, you are coming closer to my borders. And if anybody is responsible for this conversation, it will have to be the Americans. Because, once again, I mean, after the collapse of the USSR, there was no business for NATO to also include the old countries as part of the Warsaw Pact and make them members of NATO. And Russia basically has found a legitimate ground to say that this is an ambitious Europe and America trying to come closer to the proximity of my borders. So, this is how international politics unfortunately plays out. So look at the irony, Navika. Donald Trump, when he was president, was talking about beefing, actually cutting NATO funding. In fact, the European countries, they were talking about building their own national security apparatus. He was talking about cutting down on NATO support. And now you have a situation where you actually have NATO and the President Biden talking about a new transatlantic alliance. So, there is a lot of fluidity here in international politics. But I will agree with what even Sudhanshu Ji said here. And that is a tragedy of international relations today. That because you have very unethical, immoral political leadership, the countries that are not stakeholders having a skin in the game get caught in the dilemma that India is getting actually trapped into. And therefore, I believe I'll agree with Ajay and Sushant and Sudhanshu Ji that maybe India will have to take some kind of a calibrated position, but even today it is very premature to do so.
Premature to do so. Well, many people today are talking about India's position. Some saying that morality argument forces or should force India to take a position condemning Russia in its invasion of Ukraine. On the other hand, people are saying that India has kept a line of communication open with Russia. At the same time, yesterday in the White House briefing, Joe Biden, President of the United States of America, also said their lines were open with India. As of now, with India having open lines with America and Russia, seems to be a position that India has taken, and a calibrated position may just suit India for the moment, because nuances are important in international diplomacy. Yes, the moral argument is very, very strong when you see pictures of homes that have been devastated, people who have lost their lives, babies who are born amidst mortar and missiles falling around them, and families losing each other and sometimes just parting with each other in the melee after war has stricken Ukraine. But the fact of the matter is, countries have to make their own choices. In 1998, when India decided to test its nuclear weapons, there was sanctions that came from America. But India stood steadfast. And many thought in 1998 that a country that had liberalized in 1991 would just fall apart so soon after sanctions having been imposed. But India rose. India rose and has grown from strength to strength. Even in those days, when the NRI community was called upon, $4.5 billion were raised by Vajpayee, the then Prime Minister of India. Today, India has grown in strength and will have to evaluate, not necessarily under pressure, to take its position, because in what seems like a changing world order, India will have to take a decision that will hold it in good stead in the coming years, not just maybe a year or two, but maybe for decades to come. Thank you very much to my esteemed panel and panelists for joining me tonight on the NewsHour Debate number 1. Taking a short break, but on the other side, the blame game, as always, is on between the opposition and the government.